today's topic is on effective prayer and fasting. It's still under the same series of new mindset, and as I had promised, I'll do effective prayer and fasting, and the next message will be on healing, because these are the things we have realized that people are going wrong, and it's because of seeking effective prayer that people are falling prey to bad pastors, and even being confused on how to go about fasting and being able to effectively as a person communicate to God. As I was preparing this message, I got this famous verse: if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I, that's the Lord, will hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and heal their land. This verse is found in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 and verse 14. If you look at that chapter, it was at that point when Solomon had made the famous sacrifice that and the glory of God had come down, and even it was so visible, and people found themselves prostrating. It's called lying down and worshiping God, because they had noticed that it was a big thing. So God said that he was pleased with the house, and he would make it his chosen place, where if he had shut down the heavens and there were no rains, and in case locusts and pestilence were to attack the people and there was drought and people needed God's mercy or intervention, then if they come to that house and if they humble themselves and pray and seek and turn and seek the face of the Lord and turn away from their sins and their wickedness, then the Lord would hear him from heaven. That's an example of what we will be looking at. When something is effective, we say something is effective when it achieves that which it is set out to achieve. A prayer is effective if the person who is praying gets that which they are seeking. Some of the people who have made effective prayers in the Bible are like Jesus, Isaiah, Elijah, Moses, and many people, the great people that we know. So for us to be able to effectively pray, to be able to call fire from heaven, not necessarily fire, but to be able to command things the way Elijah did, what do we need first to do to be able to attain that level of effectiveness? Our teaching will be based on two chapters. That's Matthew chapter 6, although I saw also Matthew chapter 5 speaks a lot about the preparation, and so you can look at chapter 5 and chapter 6, but I'll dwell on chapter 6. Then we have Isaiah 54, not 54, 58. Isaiah 58 is what talks about the good way of fasting. Matthew chapter 6 is where Jesus was saying, when you want to pray, do not do it the way the hypocrites do. You should go to the secret place and then pray to God. And one of the things we see in this chapter is that you need to have your purpose for the prayer. Why are you praying? Are you praying because it is a ritual, something that you have to do every day? Are you praying because you want to request something from God? Are you praying because it's a thanksgiving, that you're thanking God for being yourself or being wherever or whatever you want to thank God for? Or is it a relationship? Because also those who are in a walk with God, prayer is a key part. It's a key part for maintaining this relationship. In case your prayer is a relationship, it's a walk with God, then this kind of prayer is not the kind of prayer that you will pray with others in a congregation. You will need to set time alone, like Daniel, the way they used to have a set time for prayer. And remember, tithing is something that has been encouraged, and tithing is very important, giving 10%. So you could set out your time for prayer with God to be within the 10% that of the days that God has given you. Once you set out this time for prayer, say, now, when you get there to pray in your closet, you have gone in to pray. How do you go about it? One of the guides that I found useful is, first, search within yourself to remove any distractions to your prayer, any feeling of guilt, any feeling of any sin that you have committed. Then, because at that point, when you're remembering your sin, the person that you have wronged might not be with you. What do? Make a resolve. How are you going to rectify that offense that you have made to the other person? And make sure that you carry on and do it. If it is another person, how do you go about it? If it is God, ask God to forgive you, and you have to take time to be truly sorry for that. That's what we call in the Catholic Church feeling of, you have to feel the guilt in your sin, and detest this sin, and then make a resolution to change and to do good. Empty your inside so that you are clean. Try to clean yourself. Thoughts, remove every negative thought. If there's someone who has offended you, try to look at the situation again in that time of prayer and forgive, because forgiveness has a lot of goodness. It gives you peace, and it also helps you focus, and in that cleanliness of your thoughts, you are able to make good prayers. There are times that you may feel like not praying. Maybe you are hurt, or things are not really working, and it's your time for prayer. You can go in and just tell God how you feel. It's part of effective prayer. As you express your feelings to God, and at times as you even keep quiet and lie there and listen, at times God gives you prayer points and strengthens your resolution. And as you're seated there, you will find that if you are feeling bitterness, by the time you finish, you might feel refreshed. And most of the time, in these seasons, if you really look inside without pretense, without just being sincere with yourself, you are going to experience an inner healing. And whatever prayers or points that you take from there, it will be in the good direction and it will help you progress. If it's about a need, remember there are needs and there are wants. First, be grateful for the many things God has provided for you, the simple things that God has given you. Then, most of the time, if you are a person of prayer, you will find you will not lack the needs. And in case you lack, God will always provide a way. And if you're seeking for that way, God will provide, and it will be so clear. And for the ones, God also, all the people that God has walked with have been great people. For everyone who is in this walk of God, once you learn how to pray and fast effectively, then you start a walk with God that will lead you to greatness, and you will be able, through hard work, because you also realize that no one who walked with God was a lazy person, and laziness is discouraged in the Bible. By working hard, God grants you favor and you are able to achieve that which you set out to achieve. So it is in the same chapter 6, that Jesus guides on how to pray, the prayer of our Father. This prayer looks very simple, but it's a prayer that we should encourage everyone to pray in their homes. First, because it is a reference for God. Then you call for God's presence. You ask for His provision. You ask God to forgive us, and also in the same time, at the same time as we are asking to be forgiven, we remind ourselves about the standard of God's mercy, that it is upon us forgiving that we will be forgiven. Then ask God for help where we cannot be able to see, and we ask for His deliverance. And remember, at the end of it all, it ends by telling us who God is. A God whose kingdom is His. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. This helps us remember who God is. I remember there was a time I met a friend. He was a pastor. He's still a pastor in somewhere. This pastor was struggling with daily meals for his children. And I remember telling him that, I'm sorry to put this, but Catholics rarely have these problems. So just a few you will find, and I've not seen, maybe I'm wrong, but most of the time Catholics don't have these problems of sleeping hungry and all that. So I told him, why can't you try saying the prayer of our Father on a daily basis? And he started incorporating it in his prayers. Today, after some time, he started calling me with testimonies of how people would provide. So it's a good way. As long as you ask God to provide your daily bread, God will also always provide. And also it is a reminder that we have a Father somewhere. So this I would recommend every morning or evening. Make your family say it, especially the children, because we are building them in the ways of the Lord. And once we teach them, they will keep it. Now, about fasting. What is the purpose for fasting? Prayer and fasting, we know that they are very important. It is through fasting that we seek the mercy of God. You saw where we began. If my people humble themselves. If you look at 2 Kings, when God had declared calamity on Ahab, one of the things he said, which angered his prophet a bit, was because Ahab had humbled himself. How? Fasting and putting the sackcloths and all that, the way the Israelites used to do it. Our fasting nowadays is different, but it's the same thing. And that's why we are looking at how do we do an effective fasting. Fasting is not just skipping a meal. Fast, why do we fast? We'll fast to seek God's mercy. When you are pleading for another who is like not my immediate family, fasting is good to accompany such prayers. And also we fast for a relationship with God. Remember, it is through fasting that when you look at Matthew 5 and 6, hunger and thirst for righteousness, and you shall be filled. Which means when we hunger and we thirst for righteousness, we are filled. So that one increases the relationship with God, our relationship with God. And if we do our fasting right, it will increase your righteousness and you become a dwelling place for God. So how do you do this effective fasting? Now, one of the things we have to be aware of is that there are things that God prefers more than the fasting. For example, remember, this is a walk with God, a relationship with God. Why would you fast your food yet you are purposefully sinning? So one of the things that before we get into the real fasting of food and water is to look at yourself. Which sins are overwhelming you? There is in sociology we used to learn that a habit can be created or can be broken within 21 days. If you do something consistently for 21 days, you will continue doing it freely without a lot of trouble. If you stop doing something consistently for 21 days, you will find that you no longer have that urge of doing it. But I also know that some of the sins might not be easy to drop, but the ones that are easy to drop, can you commit to dropping them? And the others, as you continue dropping these ones, even God will see your desire for change, and then He will help you to overcome these ones. Then now, when you go to Isaiah 58, because it's what dwells on fasting, when you remember, when you're praying for others, you must fast for an effective prayer. Then Isaiah 58 tells us that when you look at that chapter, I want you to read all of it because I cannot read and explain. And it's always good to go back to the Bible to confirm what people are telling you, whether it's true. We see the people desiring God. They were even fasting, they were praying, but nothing was changing in their lives. Sorry to say this, but the prayers and fasting that have been killing people in this country, if it was effective prayer and fasting, so much would have been happening. And I think maybe towards the end, so that this thing blew out, someone tried to do a real fast. Although it was forced, they must have sought the face of God in sincerity, and maybe that's why the whole thing blew out. But since there are many things we do not know, let's focus on what we are teaching today. Prayer and fasting, as if it is well done, it turns the face of God. But what are these things that will hinder our fast so that it doesn't achieve what our prayers are set out, or our fast is set out to achieve? One of the things that made the people miss was, one, strive. What is strive? You are fasting, and on your first day you're very good, second day you're very cranky, the third day you don't want to, when someone speaks to you, you're returning with bitterness, very harsh words. If someone asks you a question, you get very irritated and it turns out to a fight. That's strife. And for most couples, strife is what steals most of our happiness. Strife. That if you can work on strife, then you can overcome many things in married life, and you can be able to tap into God's blessings. Strive, that you are in the mood of prayer, something happens, it sparks you and you cannot control yourself. Strive. Others, God described it as where they would fast and have bad moods, complaining, loading heavy burdens on the others, instead of what God would call the right reasons for fasting, where God removes the burdens of his people, frees the oppressed, breaks the yoke of those who are oppressed. And to the people, it's your time to remember the poor, the needy, to think about the others. As you go with an empty stomach, you remember how a street child feels out there, and start thinking of how you can help them. It is also an opportunity to subdue your flesh, to be able to rule over your flesh and tell it that you're in charge. Then as you do all this, we see in Isaiah 58 and verse 8, then the light shall break forth like the morning, and your health will be restored, and your righteousness shall go before you, and the glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. You will no longer worry about what is happening. As long as you can see where you are going and you are not putting God to temptations, God will watch your back, and the glory of the Lord will shine upon you. So these are some of the tips of effective prayer and fasting. And also remember, there are some things, as I said earlier, that God values more than sacrifice. We sacrifice through our fasting, we sacrifice through giving. When you look at Matthew 9 and 10, God says that He seeks more mercy than sacrifice. Mercy comes with forgiveness. Forgiveness, when you forgive others, it's an act of mercy. So before you fast, start by forgiving others. There is no need of fasting, sacrificing your meals, yet you cannot forgive. Start by having mercy on others, then you can now go and sacrifice. The other thing is about obedience. Obedience ranks higher to God than sacrifice. Remember 1 Samuel 15 and 22, where Saul was being told that obedience is better than sacrifice. And it's in the same thing that Jesus continues to say that when you are giving your offertory and you remember that someone you have not forgiven, or your brother has something against you, go back and reconcile with your brother. Then you can come back and do your sacrifice or give your gift. So all this, we are first to search ourselves, and that's why we say focus. Don't just go to prayer. Have a reason for your prayer. Why are you praying? In case you don't have time to do all this, then pray God to guide you or to intercede for you in whatever you want. Then also remember you have to go back and do the right things. If you need to forgive, you could even promise God, but don't promise God if you are not going to do it. Remember in Ecclesiastes is where we are told God is already there. He loves us even before we loved Him. Don't start going to tell God promises that you are not going to keep. But all the same, for you to be an effective prayer, and that's why imagine if we were all at the level of Elijah, we would change so much. And remember, Kenya is being called to be the maid of honor for the revival times. That means you are needed. I am needed to be able to make effective prayers. And that's why this teaching, you should not take it as a joke. Go and evaluate. Where have you been failing? Why is it that you need other people to pray for you? Why can't you pray for yourself? What makes you feel like you're not connecting? And it's the same, once you achieve this, I'm telling you, even what we call praying in tongues. You know, I know there is the prayer of tongues that the Protestants do, but I also want to add that there are times that you go to the place of prayer with your idea or with your whatever you wanted to go and pray about. And as you're praying, God gives you new prayer points. And you pray, and as you're listening, you're wondering where that one came from. And it is so on point. You're saying things to your problems or to your prayer areas in a way that it speaks more effectively to the whatever needs to be done than you have ever thought about. Also remember, God needs vessels to use. During Jesus' time, before Jesus was born, Anna, there was a prophetess, Anna, who was in the temple, and her work was to pray and intercede, and she was the one who prayed before the birth of Jesus. In the same way, we are the people who are praying these end times. So as you effectively learn how to pray and perfect your life and your walk with Jesus, then you will find that you can be used. And that's when prayer items will be dropped in your spirit. Then you can pray and intercede for others. But you cannot be able to intercede for others if you cannot pray and fast effectively.